Welcome to The Explainer, everyone. Today, we are diving deep into Anthropic's brand new Claude Opus 5. And honestly, this release is completely shattering the traditional intelligence to cost curve we've all gotten used to. We're talking absolute flagship, top-tier reasoning capabilities, but bundled right into a mid-tier price bracket. It's wild. And when I say this is sending shockwaves through the community, I really mean it. Developers have been absolutely floored by the early test results, especially on the Arc AGI-3 benchmark. Now, you know this one is notoriously brutal for testing novel problem-solving on puzzles the AI has literally never seen before. Well, Opus 5 didn't just edge out previous heavyweights like GPT 5.6 Sol or Opus 4.8. It scored a massive 30.2%. That is almost 3 times higher than the previous state-of-the-art model. It's a massive jump in capability that really demands we rethink what an everyday AI model can actually pull off. So here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll meet Claude Opus 5. Second, we'll break down that frontier intelligence at half the cost. Third, we're going to talk about mastering the new effort dial. Fourth, we'll look at agentic coding and knowledge work. And finally, API changes and migration. Let's get right into it. All right, Section 1, meet Claude Opus 5, the new everyday workhorse. Moving right along to Section 2, Frontier Intelligence at half the cost. Okay, the math here is just staggering. Opus 5 is priced at $5 per million input tokens and $25 per million for the output. That happens to be exactly identical to the older Opus 4.8 model. But when you stack that up against the current absolute flagship, Fable 5, Opus 5 is literally half the cost for near-identical intelligence. And crucially, especially for you enterprise users out there, Opus 5 carries absolutely no 30-day data retention requirement. That makes this new everyday workhorse immediately viable for heavily regulated industries right out of the gate. So Anthropic didn't raise the price at all. They just dramatically raised the floor of what that price actually buys you. As you can see by these numbers, Opus 5 doesn't just compete. It actively dismantles the competition on these complex tasks. On Frontier Bench, which tests agentic coding, it hits 43.3%, clearing Fable 5 and GPT 5.6 Sol with plenty of room to spare. We already talked about that incredible Arc AGI-3 score, but look over at the rigorous occupational knowledge benchmark, GDP-Val AA. Opus 5 reaches an ELO of 1861. It wins here because it can keep its own state straight across incredibly complex, multi-step horizons without getting lost in the weeds. Section 3. Mastering the effort dial. This right here is the real paradigm shift for developers, the new effort parameter. On Opus 5, thinking is turned on by default. You now control exactly how deeply the model reasons before it outputs a single word of visible text. This is a huge deal because it means we can no longer evaluate AI with just one flat score. You actually dictate your own cost versus score curve based entirely on the budget you have for a specific task. So you have 5 distinct levels to play with, going from low all the way up to max. And here is Anthropic's actual advice on how to use this. If you're doing complex agentic coding, start at extra high. For general tasks, start at high. Then, and this is how you really save your budget, sweep downward to medium or even low. Seriously, you'd be surprised how much of your production traffic can drop a rung without losing any quality at all, saving you massive amounts of compute time and money. Now, you might be wondering, does max effort always guarantee better results? As developers, it's so tempting to just crank the dial all the way up to 5 and walk away, right? Well, don't do it. Max effort is not strictly better. In fact, on benchmarks like Frontier Bench, extra high actually achieves the peak score. It turns out max is highly prone to overthinking, which actually lowers your score and just drains your wallet. Treating max as your default setting is probably the most expensive mistake you can make with this model. Section 4, Agentic Coding and Knowledge Work. The jump in capability here is just undeniable. Look at the gap here. Older models typically sat in the 20 to 30% range, but Opus 5 dominates at 43.3%. So what does this actually mean in practice? It means no more lazy code stubs. When you ask it to do a massive refactor or build out an end-to-end feature, Opus 5 actually completes the full task. It does the heavy lifting all the way through the workflow, instead of just leaving you a bunch of annoying placeholders. Remember that 1861 ELO score on the GPT-Val-AA knowledge benchmark we looked at earlier? Well, that number officially cements Opus 5 as the new leader for complex knowledge work.
Early customers are already reporting massive success in document-to-deck pipelines. We're talking literally handing the AI a dense 60-page report and getting back a structured, perfectly formatted presentation. And it manages to do all of this while minimizing visual formatting issues across the entire long-running task, which is honestly huge. Let's translate all that capability into actual dollars. A task that would normally cost you $22.30 with Fable 5 drops to $17.79 with Opus 5 on max effort. But look closely at the high setting. It's just $10.41. That means you are securing flagship Fable 5 level knowledge work for literally less than half the price per task. It's a total no-brainer. All right, our final section, Section 5, API changes and migration. If you are migrating your systems today, please pay close attention to these breaking changes. Because thinking is on by default now, that invisible thought process shares your exact output budget. So if you don't go into your code and raise your max token limits right now, your outputs are absolutely going to truncate halfway through. Trust me, you don't want that. Also, disabling thinking entirely is now strictly capped at the high effort level. But hey, there's some great news here too. The prompt cache minimum has impressively dropped to just 512 tokens. Plus, you can finally make mid-conversation tool changes without blowing up your entire cache. That's a huge quality of life upgrade. Okay, here is probably the most counterintuitive migration step you're going to have to take. Delete your verification scaffolding. I know, we all learned to prompt AI with things like double-check your answer, or we built out these complex sub-agents just to verify the work. Seriously, delete them. Opus 5 rigorously verifies its own work completely unprompted. If you keep those old prompts in there, they'll compound with the model's natural behavior, and you'll end up trapping it in massive over-verification loops. That's just going to burn your tokens and waste your time. So, as we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you all with a question about the rapidly shifting economics of AI. Think about it. If mid-tier pricing now buys what we literally considered front-tier intelligence just a month ago, where on earth are the massive flagship models heading next? The intelligence-to-cost curve isn't just bending anymore, it's completely breaking. Thanks so much for joining this explainer. Now go dive into the documentation, tweak that effort dial, and see the results for yourself.